My husband's sister walked past me in panties, and something inside me shifted. When my husband's sister crossed the room wearing only panties, it wasn't meant to provoke. It was casual, unguarded, free. What shocked me was not her, but what awakened inside me. A new, unexpected feeling I didn't know how to name. Noticing my silence and confusion, she smiled and said something simple. Something that quietly changed how I saw myself, my marriage, and everything I had been suppressing for years. If this story helps you understand that discovering who you truly are requires courage, please like and subscribe. There are moments when you realize you've been living someone else's life, performing a role so convincingly that you've forgotten you're performing at all, until one small, seemingly insignificant encounter shatters the illusion and forces you to confront truths you've spent years avoiding. For me, that moment came on a Saturday afternoon in my own home, when my husband's sister walked casually through the living room wearing nothing but underwear, comfortable and unself-conscious in her own skin in ways I'd never allowed myself to be. What shocked me wasn't her state of undress. It was the feeling that arose in me as I watched her move through the space with such natural ease and confidence. A feeling I couldn't name initially. A recognition of something I'd been suppressing so completely that experiencing it felt like discovering a part of myself I'd never known existed. That moment of recognition would ultimately unravel my carefully constructed life, would force me to acknowledge that the marriage I'd built and the identity I'd performed were both built on foundations of denial about who I actually was and what I actually wanted. My name is Sophie Anderson, and I'm 34 years old. I'd been married to my husband James for 7 years when the encounter happened that would catalyze the complete transformation of my life and my understanding of myself. James and I had what looked like a good marriage from the outside. We were both professionals with stable careers, lived in a comfortable house in a nice neighborhood, maintained active social lives with couple friends, performed all the markers of successful heterosexual partnership. I worked as a graphic designer for a marketing firm, had built modest but steady career doing work I found satisfying if not passionate. James worked in sales for a technology company, made good money, was sociable and well-liked by friends and colleagues. Our relationship had always been more companionate than passionate. We got along well, shared similar values and life goals, functioned efficiently as partners managing household and building the life we'd planned together. Our physical relationship had never been particularly intense or frequent, settling into comfortable pattern of sex once or twice a week that felt adequate if not exciting. I'd never questioned whether this was how relationships were supposed to feel, had assumed that the passionate romance of new relationships naturally evolved into something more stable and less intense over time, that what James and I had was normal and appropriate for long-term partnership. What I didn't recognize, what I'd been actively avoiding recognizing for my entire adult life, was that my attraction to men had always felt somewhat performative, somewhat like doing what I was supposed to do rather than what I genuinely desired. I'd dated men exclusively from adolescence onward, had convinced myself that any attraction I felt toward women was just aesthetic appreciation or admiration rather than actual sexual or romantic desire, had built entire identity around being straight woman in heterosexual marriage, because that's what was expected and acceptable and safe. The possibility that I might be attracted to women wasn't something I'd allowed myself to seriously consider, had pushed down whenever fleeting thoughts or feelings suggested something beyond what I'd convinced myself was true about my sexuality. James's sister Mara was 28, 6 years younger than me, worked as a photographer specializing in portrait and fashion work. She was visiting for the weekend, staying in our guest room while she worked on a project in our city. Mara had always been someone I admired. She was confident and creative and unapologetically herself in ways I'd never managed to be, lived authentically and openly as bisexual woman in ways that seemed brave and enviable from my carefully conventional life. We'd always gotten along well, had easy, comfortable relationship as sisters-in-law who genuinely liked each other and enjoyed spending time together. The encounter that would change everything happened on Saturday afternoon. James had gone out to run errands, leaving Mara and me at the house together. I was in the living room working on my laptop on the couch when Mara emerged from the bathroom after taking a shower. Wearing only a towel wrapped around her hair and a pair of simple cotton panties, walking through the living room toward the guest room to get dressed. Her state of undress was casual and unself-conscious. She clearly felt comfortable enough in our home and in my presence to not feel the need to cover up completely, was treating the space between bathroom and bedroom the way she might in her own apartment. What happened to me as I watched her cross the room was unexpected and overwhelming. I felt attraction, not aesthetic appreciation or admiration, but actual physical desire, recognition of her body as something I wanted to touch and be close to in ways that weren't platonic or sisterly. The feeling was so intense and so clearly sexual that I couldn't rationalize it as anything other than what it was. I was attracted to Mara, was experiencing the kind of desire I'd never felt toward my husband or toward any of the men I'd dated, was recognizing in this moment of watching her move through my living room that maybe I'd been lying to myself for my entire adult life about what I actually wanted and who I actually was. I must have made some sound or had some expression that communicated my internal turmoil because Mara stopped and looked at me, noticed my obvious distress. "Sophie? Are you okay?" she asked, concern in her voice. I couldn't speak, couldn't articulate what was happening inside me, could only stare at her while my entire understanding of myself shifted in ways that felt terrifying and exhilarating simultaneously. Mara came over and sat on the couch next to me, apparently not concerned about her state of undress, or perhaps recognizing that wasn't actually the source of my distress. "What's wrong?" she asked gently. "You look like you've seen a ghost or had some kind of revelation or something. Talk to me." "I don't know how to explain what just happened," I said finally, my voice shaking. "I was watching you walk through the room and I felt something I've never let myself feel before. Something I've been suppressing or denying or just not allowing myself to recognize. And now that I've felt it, now that I've recognized it, I can't unknow it. And I don't know what to do with this knowledge." Mara's expression shifted to something like understanding mixed with compassion. "What did you feel, Sophie?" she asked, though her tone suggested she might already know the answer. "What did you recognize?" "I was attracted to you," I admitted, the words feeling both terrifying and liberating. Not in a platonic way or an admiring way. Actually sexually attracted to you. And I've never let myself feel that toward a woman before. Have spent my entire life convincing myself I'm straight even though maybe I'm not. Maybe I never have been. Maybe this whole life I've built, this marriage to your brother, all of it has been based on me performing heterosexuality rather than actually being heterosexual." Mara took my hand, gesture that was comforting rather than romantic. "That's a lot to process," she said gently. "And I'm honored that you feel safe enough to share this with me. But I need you to understand something important. I love you as my sister-in-law. I care about you deeply, but I can't be the person you explore these feelings with. You're married to my brother. Even though what you're recognizing about yourself is real and valid, acting on attraction to me specifically would create complications and pain for everyone involved that wouldn't be fair to anyone." The gentle rejection was appropriate and necessary, but also disappointing in ways I hadn't anticipated. "I know," I said miserably. "I'm not asking you to do anything about what I just told you. I'm just trying to process what this means, what I'm supposed to do with this recognition that maybe my entire adult life has been built on denial about who I actually am." Mara squeezed my hand. "What you're experiencing, recognizing your attraction to women later in life, realizing you might have been suppressing or denying fundamental aspects of your sexuality, that's not uncommon. There's even a term for it, late bloomer lesbian, or compulsory heterosexuality. Lots of women realize in their 20s or 30s or even later that they've been performing heterosexuality because it's what's expected rather than because it's actually what they want. It doesn't mean everything about your life has been a lie, but it does mean you have some difficult decisions to make about whether you want to continue living inauthentically or whether you want to start exploring who you actually are. We talked for over an hour, Mara eventually putting on clothes but continuing the conversation, sharing her own experience of coming out as bisexual in her early 20s, describing the process of recognizing and accepting her attraction to women after years of only dating men. She asked me questions that helped me articulate feelings I'd been suppressing. Had I ever been attracted to women before? Had my relationships with men always felt somewhat performative? Did I feel genuine sexual desire for James? Or was it more obligatory? The answers to all these questions suggested a pattern I'd been avoiding recognizing. I'd never been genuinely attracted to men in ways that felt natural and spontaneous. Had always felt like I was doing what I was supposed to do rather than what I genuinely wanted. "What do I do now?" I asked Mara when we'd exhausted the immediate processing. "I'm married to your brother. I've built my entire adult life around being straight woman in heterosexual marriage. I can't just suddenly come out as lesbian or bisexual or whatever I am and blow up everything without devastating people I care about and destroying the life I've built." "You have a few options," Mara said carefully. "You can decide this was just a momentary attraction that doesn't mean anything fundamental about your sexuality and continue in your marriage without exploring these feelings further. You can talk to James about what you're experiencing and see if there's some way to explore your sexuality within the context of your marriage. Some couples open their relationships or find other accommodations. Or you can acknowledge that you can't continue living inauthentically and end your marriage so you can explore who you actually are and what you actually want. None of these options are easy or painless, but continuing to suppress fundamental aspects of who you are, that's not sustainable long-term, Sophie. Eventually, the denial breaks down and you're forced to confront it anyway, usually in more destructive ways than if you'd addressed it proactively. After Mara left at the end of the weekend, I spent weeks processing what had happened and what it meant. I couldn't stop thinking about the feeling I'd experienced watching her walk through my living room. Couldn't unknow the recognition that I was attracted to women in ways I'd never allowed myself to acknowledge. I started researching compulsory heterosexuality, reading stories from other women who'd realized later in life that they were lesbian or bisexual after years of performing straightness. The experiences described felt devastatingly familiar, the sense of doing what you're supposed to do rather than what you want, the lack of genuine sexual desire for male partners, the feeling that something fundamental was always slightly off even when relationships were objectively fine. I also had to confront what this recognition meant for my marriage to James. I cared about him deeply, valued our partnership, didn't want to hurt him or destroy the life we'd built together. But I also couldn't continue performing heterosexuality indefinitely now that I'd recognized it as performance rather than authentic desire. Every time we had sex, every time he touched me affectionately, every time we engaged in the routines of heterosexual marriage, I felt increasing awareness that I was living inauthentically, that I was denying fundamental aspects of who I was in order to maintain comfortable life built on foundations of denial. About 6 weeks after the encounter with Mara, I told James I needed to talk to him about something serious. We sat in our living room and I tried to articulate what I'd been processing. I thought I might be attracted to women in ways I'd never allowed myself to recognize. Thought our marriage might have been built on me performing heterosexuality, rather than actually being straight. Needed space and time to explore what this meant for my identity and for our relationship. James's response cycled through shock, hurt, confusion, and eventually a kind of numb processing. "Are you saying you're leaving me?" he asked finally. "Are you saying our entire marriage has been a lie? That you've never actually been attracted to me?" "I'm saying I need to figure out who I actually am," I tried to explain. "And I can't do that while continuing to perform being your straight wife. I do care about you deeply, James. I have loved you in the ways I was capable of loving you. But I think maybe what I've been feeling for you is more companionate affection than actual romantic or sexual attraction. And now that I've recognized that, now that I've acknowledged that I might be attracted to women in ways I never allowed myself to explore, I can't continue pretending everything is fine when it's fundamentally not. We tried marriage counseling for several months, attempting to find some path forward that would preserve our relationship, while also allowing me to explore my sexuality. But ultimately, it became clear that what I needed, space to figure out who I actually was outside the context of heterosexual marriage, wasn't compatible with staying married to James. The divorce process was painful for both of us, not because of conflict or anger, but because we both genuinely cared about each other, even as we acknowledged that our marriage had been built on foundations that weren't sustainable once I'd recognized my actual sexuality. The divorce finalized about a year after that Saturday afternoon, when Mara had walked through my living room and catalyzed my recognition of truths I'd been suppressing for decades. During that year and in the time since, I've been on a journey of discovering who I actually am when I'm not performing heterosexuality, of exploring my attraction to women, of building identity and life that feels authentic rather than constructed around what's expected or acceptable. I've dated women, have experienced for the first time in my life the kind of natural, spontaneous desire and attraction I'd never felt toward men, have discovered what it feels like to be genuinely sexually and romantically attracted to someone rather than performing attraction because it's expected. I've connected with LGBTQ+ community, have found support and understanding from other late bloomer lesbians who've gone through similar processes of recognizing their sexuality later in life after years of living as straight women. I've rebuilt my sense of self around truth rather than around performance, have learned to value authenticity over comfort or social acceptability. My relationship with Mara evolved through this process. She remained supportive friend and family member even as my marriage to her brother ended, maintained appropriate boundaries while also providing guidance and understanding from someone who'd navigated similar territory. We never acted on the attraction I'd initially felt toward her, both recognizing that while that attraction had been catalyst for my self-recognition, pursuing it would have created complications that weren't fair to anyone involved. The moment of watching her cross my living room remained significant, not because of Mara specifically, but because of what it had revealed about me and what I'd been denying. 3 years after that transformative Saturday afternoon, I'm 37 and living life that feels genuinely mine rather than performed for others' expectations. I'm in relationship with a woman named Alex, who I'm genuinely attracted to and connected with in ways I never experienced in my marriage to James. I work in the same field but have also become involved in LGBTQ+ advocacy and support, particularly for late bloomers and people discovering their sexuality later in life. I've learned that discovering who you truly are requires courage to face truths you've been avoiding, willingness to let go of comfortable lives built on denial, commitment to living authentically even when that authenticity disrupts everything you've constructed. My name is Sophie Anderson. I was married to a man for 7 years, living what looked like successful heterosexual life, until the day my husband's sister walked casually through my living room in her underwear and awakened recognition I'd been suppressing my entire adult life. I was attracted to women, had never genuinely desired men, had built my entire identity around performing heterosexuality rather than living authentically. That moment of recognition led to difficult, painful process of ending my marriage, coming out, rebuilding my life around truth rather than around what was expected or acceptable. The woman who catalyzed that recognition remained appropriately boundaried. This wasn't story of affair with sister-in-law, but rather story of one moment revealing truth that required complete transformation of how I lived and who I allowed myself to be. Sometimes discovering yourself requires courage to acknowledge what you've been denying. And sometimes freedom begins with one moment of recognition you can no longer ignore or suppress. Thank you for reading. If this story helps you understand that discovering who you truly are requires courage, please like and subscribe.